Well, Dick, thank you very much indeed, and I'm looking forward to our discussion now because I think you will actually receive a lot of passion and focus in particular areas. As a business journalist myself, I think when we talk about manufacturing, we focus on the A dollar, the mining tax, the carbon tax, and actually getting down to some really specific issues right from the horse's mouth over here. I think is going to be very valuable. So we've got about I totted it up yesterday, about 55 billion worth of market cap represented by these fellas, and that is not including the gentleman that's just arrived, Andrew Liveris. If we add the Dow Chemical Company, that's another 42 billion US. Slightly less in Australian dollars, it's a sign of the times. But anyway, a serious amount of business leadership here. So I will rattle through a brief introduction, in part to show you not just who these fellows represent, but also a little bit of their history, so you can see they're actually a bit across even more than what they currently represent. So beyond Dick, to your right beyond Dick, Ian Cumming, Executive General Manager of BlueScope. Mr. Cumming joined BlueScope in 2003. He's responsible for group management of human resources, corporate affairs and safety. He previously ran HR and corporate services at Southcorp for 6 years. Head of HR before that for ICI Australia. He's also held IR management positions in the energy, construction and resources industry. Next to him, Mike Beardsell, Divisional Managing Director of Boral Cement. Appointed Executive General Manager there in 2009 and joined Boral in 2001. And before that, Mike worked as an independent consultant, held senior roles in Iron Ore Co of Canada, Peak Hill Resources and North Forest Products Tasmania, where he was CEO. Now, next to him, Philip Joe, CEO and Managing Director of Capral. Phil joined Capral in 2009. Before his appointment, he was EGM of the Cement Division at Boral and was Managing Director of Blue Circle Southern Cement since 1999, and before that he was MD at Stegbarn. Rob Sindel, next to him, CEO and Managing Director of CSR. Rob has worked at CSR since 2008, was appointed Chief there and Managing Director in January last year. He's previously been with Civil and Marine UK, Hanson, Heidelberg Cement Group, Hanson Aggregates UK, and Pioneer Australia, where he worked for over 13 years. Then comes James Fazzino, Managing Director and CEO of Incitec Pivot since 2009. He was previously Chief Financial Officer there, also had many years with Orica in several business and financial roles, including Investor Relations Manager, CFO, and Project Leader of Orica's Group Restructure in 2001. Then Matt Sexton, who's the Chief Operating Officer at Rheem. Matt was appointed COO of Water Heater Specialist Rheem in 2007. He previously held a number of general management roles at Siemens in Australia and overseas. Early career was in consumer marketing in Australia, firms like Rickett and Coleman, Arnott's and Tooheys. And he's been responsible for establishing and maintaining a number of advanced manufacturing engineering facilities in Oz and Asia over the last 20 years. And finally, it's a great pleasure to also welcome Andrew Liveris, who launched his own manufacturing plan for Dow yesterday. He's Chief Executive and Chairman of the Dow Chemical Company worldwide. He began his Dow career in 1976 in Australia, of course. He's also co-chair of President Obama's Advanced Manufacturing Partnership in the US and is author of Make It in America, a book released last year which outlines the company's vision for an advanced manufacturing economy. And of course he's also a local lad from Darwin. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Now we'll go for about 45 minutes and I will then throw open the floor to discussion. Everybody is welcome within the time allowed. I'm told that the CEOs will be available for journalists to bail them up after that, which would be tremendous. I beg your indulgence. Tony Jones on Q&A has 6, which he just manages to do. I have 8 captains to deal with, and he'd kill me, but I reckon he's debate light. This is debate heavy. So I suggest, gentlemen, that if you want to jump in, I will try and put the appropriate question to the appropriate captain. But please feel free to jump in and add to one another. Right. So off we go. I thought the logical way to do this was using MA's 4 pillars, and I thought I'd also start with energy, because I think that was one of the most interesting proposals put out today. So there was Dick talking about reserving a proportion of gas for local use. It's a pretty explosive idea, even if it does happen in the US. Perhaps I could throw it over to James Zeno to talk to us about competition here. Sure. and what that energy cost does.
Thanks very much. And, our value proposition's pretty clear. If you take gas and export it as LNG, you triple its value. And, as Dick said, if you produce a high-end emulsion, an explosive emulsion that we would shoot in the Hunter Valley, something that was developed at Mount Thorley Warkworth, actually, up the road, you can increase its value by up to 20 times. And that's very consistent with what Andrew's talked about, about an 8 times multiple. And I guess our value proposition is Australia is missing out on that value add. And really, from our perspective, Incitec Pivot's perspective, we can actually, as a country, have our cake and eat it too, in that we can have a vibrant LNG industry. If we keep some of that gas, we can develop it into manufactured goods and get that multiple I've talked about. And also, we can keep some of it for clean power generation, importantly. And of course, if we do that, everyone wins. Governments get to tax that 20 times rather than 3. Local communities benefit, and we've got a rule of thumb in our business that if we employ 1 person in the gate, there is another 4 people employed outside of the gate in the local community. And of course, companies benefit because ultimately all of that ends up as a dividend flow to Australian investors, which once again the government gets to tax. So really for us, we think we need to recognise as a community, number one, the Australian people own the gas, not any one company, and that we need government action to ensure that we end up with the cake rather than the crumbs.
Mike Birdsall, can I ask you to perhaps add to that? Because I know this is probably an issue that affects you as well.
Yeah, it does, and perhaps I can give you another case study. We manufacture cement in Victoria. That plant actually operates at a pretty good standard in terms of its greenhouse emissions because it burns gas, whereas most cement around the world is made with coal and emits more CO2 per tonne. It's a plant that is challenged because of the level of the Australian dollar, so its costs relative to imports have gone up by 40% as the Aussie dollar went from 75 cents to 105. But the question of whether it will survive in the long term is very much influenced by policy settings in a whole heap of areas. When I look at the energy invoices for that plant, the first thing I see is the line item for the renewable energy target, which cost the plant $700,000 per year. Since January, we've started to see a line item called the Victorian Energy Efficiency Target. That's costing the plant $1 million a year. From July the 1st, we'll see the cost of the carbon scheme come into play, which starts at about $400,000 a year, rises to $1 million a year over 3 years. So right there, you see $3 million per year of costs that are coming from a range of policies that were implemented by both sides of government, by government at state and at federal level. Each one of those probably looked quite reasonable in isolation, but when you put them together, there's $3 million of cost on a cost base of about $60 million for that plant. It makes a real difference about whether that plant is going to be here long term. And so it's taking a step back and looking at those policy issues in total and saying, have we really got the settings right here and what do we need to change? That's why I'm here today.
Andrew Liveris, can I bring you in here too, because this is obviously a central part of your manufacturing plan for Australia. You said, I think, Australia is one of the few natural gas-rich countries that simply doesn't get it.
Well, firstly, I just so feel at home here on the stage. Can I take you all with me on the road? Because, I really don't find a lot of very educated, literate CEOs in the manufacturing sector that get this value add point as strong as those two comments I just heard, and hopefully the others feel the same. It is a real statement that I made in that report we launched yesterday. But let me, is this microphone working? Let me also say that let me state what the issue is. The issue is that gas provinces around the world are either controlled by state-owns or an oligopolistic structure called the independent oil companies. Okay? That's the statement of fact. And this country has allowed the IOCs to control the value proposition. In the US, what's happened with shale gas discoveries is nothing to do with the IOCs. It's got everything to do with the American wildcatter, the entrepreneurial small gas companies that went out there and responded to the price signal of $10 and said, we're going to go drill. And with new technology, actually it's old technology, but newly applied in shale, we now have a surplus that not even the IOCs can control the gas price. All right, that's the statement of fact. And to allow this country's gas to go into the hands of single contracts trying to establish a gas price that is a world price, which is what they want, like we have in oil, and they can't get because gas is not fungible. It's very expensive to ship around, as we know. To let that price be set on contracts to China, Korea, and Taiwan, or wherever else, and come back here as a domestic gas price is a travesty that has to be overcome. Now, Ian McFarlane in the front row there and everyone else in Australia who's very literate on the subject will tell me we don't interfere with free markets. I have a news for you. This is not a free market. This is a very unfair market.
What do you think, Andrew, the international reaction would be if, say, the government decided to put in place, a similar regime that perhaps America has now?
The WTO allows domestic reservation schemes on non-tradable goods. Okay, it's not an issue. No one will notice. But these guys here, and hopefully Dow, will do value add and create new wealth for this country and diversify away from exposure to the commodity cycle. This is a country strategy that is begging to be put in place. I've spent 30 years trying to get a plant built here in Australia. Okay, 30 years. Successive administrations, loads of intelligent people, and I get the conversation, the market won't like it. That's nonsense. Okay? We do joint ventures all over the world with governments to add value to their natural resources. Our country should be doing the same.
And I heard a story actually last night about from somebody very senior in manufacturing who said pretty much at the start of the mining boom, there were a couple of big multinationals who went to talk to the government. They had no skin in the game of manufacturing here. They told the government that the Chinese had insisted on contractors being used as part of the resource supply chain. They're contractors in China, right? And that's exactly what the big multinationals did. They said, okay, fine. And when this point was actually made to policymakers, it was a big aha moment. But by that time, a lot of things have been locked in. To what extent is gas pricing and the power of many of the energy companies locked in, do you think?
Well, I mean, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When did we get an oil cartel? And when did we all accept it as locked in? And why have we allowed a few producers to set the price and then allowed the financial markets to put the speculative number in there? Okay, so yes, you're right. Things become institutionalized with time. There's a natural barrier here on the natural gas point, which is it's not shippable easily. It's billions of dollars, of which this country, by the way, is participating in. So is Qatar, so is a few other countries. But I would argue that Australia has intellectual capital to apply to its value add that other countries don't. We're one of the few countries in the world that have the blessing of value below ground and value above ground. The intellectual capital of Australia, these companies and many others, to add value from a technology content point of view and become the exporter of first choice. Is that gone up again? Yes. Am I doing something to it? Is there some big brother back there that's controlling my voice?
You need to become a member.
There you go.
Well, no,
That's coming up through. So testing.
Yeah, and Tiki,
Yeah,
the point I'd make is what Andrew is talking about is real. Our company is looking at spending $700 million in the US that could have been spent here in Australia. Now, I've got an issue around that because I've got a 7 and 10-year-old. In terms of the technology, the emulsion that I talked about was developed here. That allows us to blast in ground that's unstable. In fact, we use that technology to blast in the middle of a live volcano at Lihir. That's Australian-grown technology. So we do have the smarts in the country. It's a matter of aligning that. The point I'd make is we can actually have our cake and eat it too. So it's not a matter of LNG or value adding or electricity generation. It's all of that.
James, I want to ask you, I alluded earlier to a very constructive meeting earlier today with government folk ministers, and this obviously was one of the issues that would have come up. We've got Mr. Ferguson's energy white paper sitting there. What was the response to this idea? Because it's quite a radical one.
Well, I guess the government needs to, speaking for the government, needs to actually consider the responses to the white paper. And, as a company, we're putting that response. And I think it is open because this is an extraordinary opportunity for Australia and our kids. And we need to go out and grab it. And it's a matter of looking at the value chain. And if you think about it, the market dislocation we've got is only the government can look over the entire value chain. So in terms of what the LNG companies are doing, that's very logical. Why is that logical? Because the part they play in the value chain is between taking the stuff out of the ground and marketing it. If you look at our position, we can't control the whole value chain because we're not gas producers. We take gas and turn it into explosives. So only the government can play a role, and that's why the government needs to step forward.
Well, I got you there, James. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we do talk about it. But in terms of energy in the carbon context, what is that doing for you competitively?
Yeah, look, firstly, let me go back. As a company, we support action on climate change. Once again, you just need to look at your kids and understand we need to do something about it. The concern we've got is one of keeping an open, level playing field. And if you have an open economy with an exchange rate that moves with the market, you've got to get everything else right. And the government simply can't go off, in our opinion, and act in advance of our competitors offshore. Now, let me tell you a story about urea. Urea is a product we produce just under the Gateway Bridge in Brisbane. We employ 500 Australians doing that. Produce it from clean Australian gas. It can be produced in China, and when it's produced in China, they gasify coal, extremely high in its carbon footprint. And of course, in addition, you've got to transport it to Brisbane so our farmers can use it. What the policy on carbon's doing is saying we'll penalise the clean Australian manufacturer of urea, and we'll give our competitors in China a leg up. And that just